Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Manulife Business Success Series, Business Resources Tools for Working with Students. My name is Allison Mitchell, and I'm the Program Manager of the Access Student Talent Program with the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek a renewed relationship based on the foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is safe and welcoming space for all. We know there is more that we can do, and we are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors. A special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership, and this month's presenting sponsor, Gore Mutual Insurance. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before this session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphones are muted throughout the presentation to reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that come up throughout the session, you can type them into the chat box in the question box of your control panel. If they are technical questions in nature, then our team will get back to you as soon as possible. If your questions are for our presenter today, then we will hold all the questions and talk about them at the end of the presentation. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's webinar in a follow-up email. I would now like to invite Katerina Chrysostomo, Director of Marketing with Gore Mutual Insurance, to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, Allison. Gore Mutual Insurance is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. I have the privilege of introducing today's speaker, Andrew Beeler. As Director of Partnerships and Experiential Learning for the Business and Higher Education Roundtable, BHER, Andrew oversees all aspects of skills, partnership, development, and delivery. Andrew joins from the Conference Board of Canada, where he led national consultations on work-integrated learning and managed a research portfolio on experiential learning. He previously held senior roles at Ryerson University and the Sustainability and Education Policy Network. You can find his writing on education and skills in Journal of Education for Sustainable Development, Canadian Journal of Higher Education, Environmental Education Research, Sustainability, and Teachers College Record. You may be interested in his co-authored book, Critical Education and Socio-Material Practice. Andrew holds a PhD in the Joint Program in Communication and Culture at York University and Ryerson University, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Saskatchewan. Thank you all for joining us today, and I will now pass it back to Allison.
Thanks so much, Katerina. The Chamber's Access Student Talent Program helps to connect businesses with post-secondary students locally in our region, and we are thrilled to have BHER as the organization that supports us so that we're able to run this program for businesses in our community. We know that many businesses have been struggling during the pandemic, and we also know that there's been really great examples of how students have been helping businesses through the pandemic. There's lots of different ways that businesses can work with students, and we're going to talk about some of those ways today. For any business that's interested in learning more about working with students, you're welcome to reach out to me, and my contact information will be in the follow-up email that you receive after the webinar. We can schedule a call, we can talk about your business needs, and then what we do in the Access Student Talent Program is we'll take those business needs and we'll figure out whether there are options for you for working with students, and we'll summarize those options for you. And then if there's an option you'd like to explore further, we'll connect you to the right people at the right post-secondary school. As you've heard in the introduction today, we're joined by Andrew Beeler from the Business Higher Education Roundtable. He's going to spend a few minutes sharing some information with us, and then he and I are going to chat about the tools and resources that are available for businesses who are working with students. Andrew, you can begin your presentation.
Thanks so much for the lovely introduction. And as Allison mentioned, our brief intro here today will kind of set the context for a fireside chat between Allison and I on supporting businesses and small businesses in work integrated learning programs. So let's see here. I'll offer an overview of Business and Higher Education Roundtable, give some context on work integrated learning, an overview of our resource hub, which will be coming out in the first week of June, and a brief overview of our research portfolio. We have an RFP launching today, so just giving an overview of that, and then we'll dive into the fireside chat. The Business and Higher Education Roundtable is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization bringing together Canada's largest companies and leading post-secondary institutions. We are a convener and connector, bringing people together to create a thriving Canada where everyone has an opportunity to reach their potential. We have three main strategic pillars, so skills and talent, expanding our program to increase Canada's work-integrated learning capacity, and bringing together stakeholders to help Canada's people, industries, and institutions navigate the future of work. We will boost Canada's research, development, and innovation culture to drive economic development by facilitating collaboration between post-secondary institutions and businesses on shared challenges and opportunities. And of course, we're a convener, and this is really central to our identity. A leading voice in cultivating that conversation to drive action on skills, talent, and innovation with leaders across sectors and across the country. Our current mandate in our skills and talent pillar that I just mentioned is to create these experiential learning opportunities, 44,000 by 2022 for students in their first post-secondary degree or diploma program through partnerships with Canadian organizations such as Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. We're lucky to be working with Allison on this goal, and we're working with organizations really across Canada to ensure students get these valuable experiential learning opportunities. We have a current focus on underrepresented regions, employers, and student groups. So what is work integrated learning? I think the Access Student Talent Program does a great job of demystifying this, but just for our audience here today, you've probably heard of internships or co-ops. So those are examples of work integrated learning. It's really a broad umbrella that describes education and training that formally links a student, an academic institution, and an employer to integrate the student's post-secondary studies with an authentic work experience. And really central to any type of will is that it has to be valuable for the student in terms of the learning outcomes and the employment outcomes, crucially, and to the employer in terms of helping them gain access to talent. So there's a wide variety of types of work integrated learning. The oldest form and a form that I've spent a lot of time doing research on and working with stakeholders on is apprenticeships. And if you're in Ontario right now, you know that we're trying to modernize our apprenticeship system. So apprenticeships combine about 80% at the workplace experience with 20% in-class training, 2 to 5 years to complete. So they're at the more intensive end of the spectrum when it comes to will experiences. Co-ops, Canada is known for our co-op programs. Might be the first type of will that comes to your mind when I mention the term. But work integrated learning, is not just co-ops or internships, which you've probably heard of as well. It also includes, applied research projects, for instance, where students participate in research occurring primarily in workplaces, sometimes also in class. It could include consulting projects, design projects, community-based research projects with industry partners. Community service learning has been around for a long time, but often it's not thought about in relation to will. Integrates meaningful community service with classroom instruction, really strengthen communities. Entrepreneurship, so really giving students access to those resources, space, mentorship, and funding to develop their own startups. And that can also include placing students at startups themselves. So field placements, work experiences. There are a broad array, and this list here of traditional types of will is commonly accepted, but there are emerging types of will that we'll talk about a little bit today, variations upon some of those traditional types I've mentioned, as well as emerging new types of will that are really quite novel. So micro placements can last anywhere from a day or two to a few weeks. Students work individually or in teams to tackle an industry challenge. Of course, with the impact of the pandemic, placements have typically, most placements have gone remote. Incubators and startups, so students being placed to undertake projects for a startup business. Shared apprenticeship models, so that's where an apprentice may rotate between employers during their on-the-job training and be exposed to a greater variety of workplace environments. Also, is a little bit less of an ask for an employer if they don't have the full scope of work to offer the apprentice. That apprentice may rotate between their work site and another. Consulting projects that students working individually or in teams to offer consultancy services to businesses, and these can be really valuable. A few others to mention, I should mention that experiential learning is a little bit less common in the arts, and so mentioning here performances in field schools. Those are the forms of experiential learning that are more common in the arts, but need to be advanced. Competitions. So the Business and Higher Education Roundtable runs the Canada Comeback Challenge with post-secondary institutions across Canada where students work in teams to tackle some of Canada's most urgent business challenges. And this past year, all those were, of course, COVID related. We'll see what the challenges that our industry partners give us this year will be, but it's, of course, a really important type of work integrated learning. So, as you've seen from that list, there are a wide range of ways in which students can work with employers, ranging from a day or two to multiple years. And one of the things that we've been working on to help us reach our target of 44,000 work integrated learning placements is a Will Resource Hub. We undertook intensive consultations this past year in 2020 with over 600 stakeholders from across the private, public, and academic and not-for-profit sectors across Canada. We engage stakeholders in every major region. And we're really trying to understand some of the barriers that businesses, and particularly small businesses, face when it comes to working with post-secondary students. And coming out of those consultations, those conversations, and I should emphasize, this wasn't just a survey, these were in-depth conversations. We sat down for an hour and a half with stakeholders to really listen, understand their needs, and coming out of this organically was what a broad suite of tools and resources to support employers as well as students and educators in participating in quality will experiences. And we're really excited to be launching this in early June. The resources include a return on investment guide and financial support guide, as well as online mentorship resources and a course that we're developing there, assessment resources, equity, diversity, inclusion resources. So really a broad suite of tools to support both employers who are new to work integrated learning, as well as businesses who have had some engagement but are looking to either expand their engagement or improve their program in particular kinds of ways, for instance, to diversify their talent pipeline, for instance. In connection with this, we're also developing out a mentorship hub, which includes an online mentorship course, mentorship stories, short video series with mentors and mentees, and a mentorship strategies guide. Today, we're actually launching a request for proposals for organizations to work with us toward that 44,000 will opportunity goal. And we have three main portfolios: equity, diversity, and inclusion and will, advancing will opportunities in rural, remote, and northern regions, and entrepreneurship, small and medium-sized enterprises. And I'll focus here on the SME portfolio, given the audience. So advancing skills, training, and will-based solutions for diverse entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized employers. And within this portfolio, we already are really happy to be working with Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce and the Access Student Talent Program. But we're looking to engage with additional partners to better support small businesses, and really looking to reduce barriers to participation for small businesses, to strengthen employer engagement capacity within regional ecosystems, and to identify and scale up futures of programming that can better support small businesses and medium-sized employers, and really co-creating tools and resources for the hub I mentioned to better support employers. So we're looking for organizations who have that experience of working with small businesses and entrepreneurs, and we're looking for partners who can work closely with us and our team to translate program insights with the broader community. So that's a little bit of context for why I'm here today and why I'm so excited to have this fireside chat with Allison. And I think there will probably be questions that come up, but hopefully some of that information gives some context in terms of where I'm coming from and where we're coming from when it comes to connecting students with employers. So yeah, over to you, Allison.
Good. Thanks so much, Andrew. I appreciate that. So maybe we'll get started, and I'll remind the audience that if you do have any questions for Andrew, please put them into the question box, and we will certainly address those questions at the end. So Andrew, you mentioned in your presentation that the organization underwent fairly extensive consultations in 2020 with stakeholders, and I'm wondering if there were any findings from those consultations that surprised you.
Great question, Allison. So yes and no. So the barriers that were identified, what those barriers were wasn't necessarily surprising, but the importance or the ranking of those barriers was surprising. So we identified sort of the top 4 barriers that small businesses face when it comes to working with post-secondary students on will placements. And I was surprised that actually staffing capacity, supervisory capacity was at the top of the list, actually ahead of economic and funding constraints. Obviously with the current environment and the shutdowns and so forth and so on, and the world that we now live in, I thought that would be at the top. And of course, I give the caveat that of course, supervisory and staffing capacity is not unrelated to financial constraints, of course. But we were a bit surprised that came out on top, and in particular, small businesses are just concerned about having the adequate staff on hand to supervise students and to give them the kind of support that they need. And there are some aspects of that are really quite interesting, including some stakeholders voicing that they'd appreciate stronger support when it comes to supervision and mentorship of post-secondary students, some guidance and training support in terms of how to best lead students. Really came out, and so we're a bit surprised that came out on top, but it is something that's been in conversation before. So I thought it would come up somewhere, but yeah, that was the top barrier.
Okay, great. And the Will Resource Hub that you talked about, so it's pretty exciting that this is going to be a resource that's available for businesses. When does it come out?
First week of June.
Okay, on the BHER site.
On the BHER site, yeah, we're really excited to launch the Will Resource Hub, and yeah, we're very, very close to launching that. So that's coming out in the first week of June, and we'll share with your team, Allison, and the folks on this call. And when that comes out, you'll see it on social media and whatnot. Okay, great. And did those consultations kind of shape the content or the tools and the resources that are going to be in that hub? Exactly. So yeah, it was really an organic process. We really like to have in-depth conversations with folks here within our R&D team, and we wanted to hear from a diverse range of stakeholders. And so just reiterating some of those barriers, staffing constraints, financial barriers, recruitment challenges, the lack of a clear sight line into how sort of will programs work at the post-secondary level. And I know Access Student Talent does such a wonderful job of supporting SMEs and having a better sightline to what the will options are that are available. But for many small businesses across Canada, they don't have that kind of support. And of course, program inflexibility is a huge thing. And of course, acknowledging that many post-secondary institutions this past year have taken some steps to improve program flexibility, but it remains a real challenge for many small and medium-sized businesses. Just the lack of agility in terms of the will options out there. So there's some improvements. I mean, the length of co-op programs in some cases have been shortened, and there are other adjustments that are being made. But there's more of that work that needs to happen. And really, in those consultations, like, we're trying to understand the barriers first and foremost. But we were also asking about what is needed. What would really help businesses navigate some of these challenges, and there are a few things that came out there. But just to give you an example, many stakeholders identified that there's really not enough information. There's no sort of central hub where folks can go and just to understand what are the different options when it comes to working with post-secondary students. A lot of institutions are decentralized. You have to go here, there, and the next place to figure out the options. So we wanted to create a hub that sort of made that a little clearer and a little bit easier to navigate for businesses. And so that's one example, and one of the tools we have on there is a decision tree to help employers really navigate some of the will options in relation to their business needs and their business profile. And it's a web-based tool that supports businesses in navigating that landscape.
So, a lot of our audience today is going to be small businesses, for example. So I'm wondering if you can dive a little bit deeper in terms of the resources and the tools that we can expect in the hub in terms of what's available for employers, especially small businesses who are new to work integrated learning.
Yeah, absolutely, Alison. So yeah, we're super excited to offer this suite of tools and resources for small businesses and Kitchener and Waterloo and across Canada. So yeah, to give you a sense, we offer resources that to support employers who are new, brand new to work integrated learning. The decision tree I mentioned is an example of that. We can get into that, as well as employers who are looking to expand their program. Or improve some aspect of their programming, whether assessment or mentorship or other aspects of their program. So a few of the resources that we're really excited to offer include our ROI guide and the related financial supports guide. So these two tools work hand in hand. Many employers that we spoke with last year during our consultations expressed that it's just difficult to navigate the funding landscape, right? There's different funding opportunities to support an employer's engagement with students, depending on their province and their industry and the type of engagement that they pursue. So all of that can be quite bewildering and difficult to navigate. You have to go from one network website to another to kind of do the research yourself. And so we wanted to do some of that back-end work for businesses just to make the existing financial supports a little bit easier to navigate. And so we have a searchable financial supports guide that just basically allows you to input your region, your industry, the category you're looking for, and it pulls up different funding opportunities for you to help offset some of the costs of taking on a student. And so this resource, the financial supports guide, I think will be quite helpful in terms of just navigating the funding landscape. And that works hand in hand with our return on investment guide, which is useful both for employers who want to get a high level picture of the benefits and the factors that inform the kind of benefits they could realize from working with students, as well as employers who want to really develop out and actually calculate the financial benefits they're currently receiving from their existing work with students.
Okay, great. So if we go back to some of the research that you've done, I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the best practices for working with students that you have found, particularly as it relates to small businesses.
Yeah, that's a great question, Allison. So so here, I'll emphasize that the best practices that I've focused on in those consultations and ongoing really are best practices for supporting the skills and training needs of small and medium-sized enterprises. We do have research and some deliverables around how to best support small businesses who are looking to mentor students, and we can get into that. But really, one thing I'd like to highlight is just some of the best practices when it comes to both post-secondary institutions and workforce agencies who are looking to support small businesses. And I think, Allison, you do a great job with Access Student Talent on this note, supporting with those one-on-one advising sessions that you do, and all of the other great work that you do supporting small business, so obviously a huge shout out to the work that you do there. But the research that we've done really is to identify best practices for other organizations in our space who have historically and continue to struggle when it comes to supporting the small businesses in the space. And some of those emerging models I mentioned in my introduction, we've found identify actually in the report on the consultations 6 emerging models that show a lot of potential when it comes to better supporting small business. And so those include, consulting, micro placements, shared apprenticeship models, and a few others. And really what ties those together, those kinds of approaches, is the financial aspect in terms of offering lower cost or no cost options, obviously, acknowledging the situation that obviously, small and medium-sized businesses are in right now in Canada, and we need to offer some lower cost options. So integrating that into your program design is important, and offering those types of opportunities, as well as helping to navigate the funding landscape, further to the point of that financial supports guide that we'll be offering. And really, in terms of the stakeholder engagement, programs that work with businesses, that co-design their programming with small business to make that really address their needs, and this has been done with shared apprenticeship models, for instance. There's some great examples of that. I think of Support Ontario Youth, and Ontario runs a shared apprenticeship model that has been co-designed with small employers, for instance. So I can speak at length at sort of best practices when it comes to designing programs that improve access to skills and talent for small business. I'm a little bit hesitant to tell small businesses themselves how to engage, but we can get into sort of best practices and more generally in relation to mentorship and so forth if you want.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, if you were talking with a small business owner, what tips would you give them in order to prepare them to lead a student?
Yeah, great question. So there's we can really get into this one, Allison. So we have this mentorship hub that we'll be releasing, and the mentorship report and course that kind of gives. We're excited about these tools because they make this a bit more accessible in terms of like, how do I lead a student? At the beginning of a placement, in the middle, at the end, and there's a lot of pieces to consider. But in general, some high-level pieces to think about if you're a small business owner looking to lead students. Managing expectations, right? So right at the start, that's one of the best practices that I think, it can't be underlined enough. In other words, what are you hoping to achieve with the placement? What kind of work do you want the student to undertake? Having that conversation with them at the beginning to manage expectation. Look, this is what the work is about. This is the scope of work that we can offer here at our workplace. And then, understanding what their goals and objectives are for the placement, in terms of the learning outcomes they hope to achieve. What kind of work, what kind of projects they want to work on, what kind of work is aligned with their career goals and their academic studies, right? because sometimes those things are aligned and sometimes not so much. But sitting down and having that conversation right at the start of a placement to figure out, how you can align. And of course, I mean, with access student talent, other supportive post-secondary programs in this space, there are people who can help you with that if you're a small business owner. But that doesn't mean you don't have to also do some of that work yourself, right? Of sitting down and really trying to understand what the student is trying to achieve and how it aligns with the work that you're doing, right?
So if a business were to go into the Resource Hub or the Mentor Hub, what can they expect to find in terms of, is it documents, is it videos? Like what are the types, what are the formats of the resources?
Yeah, great question, Allison. So yeah, so the return on investment guide includes an ROI template. So that's basically a template to measure the return on investment that you're getting from working with students. So that's the downloadable Excel document, and then basically a step-by-step to walk you through. One of the tricky things that with ROI from Will is calculating the benefits from Will. So so we offer step-by-step guidance when it comes to actually measuring your return on investment from Will. And so that's kind of a step-by-step guide. You have the template. You can have you can sort of make a stab at calculating your ROI. If there's any barriers that you encounter, you can return to the step-by-step guide. We also have a factors, a document that outlines the factors, a web-based document that outlines the factors that inform your ROI from Will. So how to consider, you want to consider the length of the placement, for instance, the type of Will you're engaging with, the recruitment process. There are a whole lot of things you want to consider. So we also offer some tips and advice around what you should think about if you want to kind of maximize that the benefits of engaging with students. So there's those types of resources, searchable online resources. So the financial supports guide, you can filter down into the supports for your region. So that's a web-based tool. And then we have a video series, and I should mention the video series actually come out a bit later in the summer, but there's a whole bunch of videos that we've produced from small business perspective, from student perspective, from the perspective of employers working in rural, remote, and northern regions. So there are video resources that basically introduce our audience to some of the different considerations when it comes to working with students in variety contexts. And then and for the mentorship piece, they will have a guidebook and some checklists and sort of easy to use tools to kind of keep you on track with supervising and mentoring students. And those are going to be available on the website in early June. And then we also have a course that's in development as well, which I should mention, which is they're 15-minute modules where employers can go on, and if you're a supervisor at a small business, for instance, and you want to basically practice some of the mentoring skills involved in leading a student, you can kind of take 15 minutes at lunch and practice some of those skills. So there's 3 15-minute modules that can be completed sort of on your own time, and it's scenario-based learning. So essentially, a supervisor will navigate a scenario, some of the common scenarios that supervisors and mentors encounter when it comes to leading students in the workplace, and practice responding to those scenarios and get some feedback that's evidence-based and sort of, it's practice-based online learning essentially at your own pace. That will be released in the fall. So that's an online course that we have. So that's a bit of a sense of the range of resources. Some of them are documents you'd read, some of them are templates you'd download, videos, and then there's the course as well. So yeah.
Okay, great. So you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the consultations and what surprised you from the consultations, in that one of those things was capacity in terms of being a barrier. And now we're talking about mentorship and supervision. So I'm wondering if if you're talking to somebody who's never worked with a student before, how would you describe supervising and mentoring as being different? Because they can be different. and they can be part of the same role. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how they might be different.
Absolutely. So supervision, overseeing a student's work is, of course, performance focused, and I actually see on-the-job training as a kind of a continuum from direct instruction on the one side. If you're a supervisor and you're leading a student, you're often in the position where you just need to offer direct instruction, clear instructions, and communicate those in appropriate ways with students. Increasingly that's remote, so even instruction is getting a little bit different now, right? It might happen through screen sharing, for instance, to instruct a student on a task, or if you're in the construction sector, for instance, that might still be in person right now, but with all the safety protocols and so forth. So that would be like one end of the spectrum would be instruction. And then on the other end of the spectrum would be mentorship. And mentorship really is about personal and professional development. And mentoring may be, those relationships may happen organically, informally, as you mentioned, through a relationship with a supervisor or through a relationship with someone else in your workplace. It could be a peer, it could be someone who isn't your supervisor but is also at that workplace whom you form a relationship with, or someone who's assigned to you as a mentor. In some programs, in some companies, that is also the case. And then kind of in the middle is coaching, which is sort of a very intentional, performance-based support and working with students to improve their performance in specific areas in the workplace. And so on-the-job training really encompasses the whole spectrum. Instruction is important, coaching is important, mentorship is important. And in terms of the roles, the supervisor role is key. And so, empowering supervisors to support students in all those areas is important. And, from supervising the students, direct work, at a minimum to, hopefully in the long run, facilitating those mentoring relationships, which could happen organically. And it could be the supervisor as the mentor, or it could be someone else. It could be someone the student works with, but isn't the supervisor, right? So
So I actually think that's a really great point, that the supervision and the mentoring doesn't have to be the same person. That could help from a capacity standpoint. If somebody believes that they don't have enough capacity to work with a student, maybe some of those roles are split up. I've also seen where mentorship of students can be a really great professional development opportunity for a staff person within an organization who maybe isn't quite a leader yet, but they're interested in getting into leadership. And so starting to mentor some students really helps that employee develop their own leadership skills. And so, especially in small businesses, sometimes training budgets aren't there, or they're not very big. And so something as simple as mentoring a student can really be some great professional development for staff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Allison. So that's one of the huge benefits for a small business, right? It's a professional development opportunity, and you can through work integrated learning, you can facilitate that internally. A lot of times organizations kind of offer that kind of professional development, externally by connecting their staff to, for instance, like a newcomer mentorship program or something like that, which is fabulous, and people should do that. But you can also, facilitate it internally. If you have some students on staff, give some of your other staff members the opportunity to mentor them in areas of interest, in areas that they're passionate about. I think is important, right?
Yeah.
And that can work wonders, for someone's professional development. It's low cost. It's like, it doesn't cost you anything. You already have the student. Gives the staff member an opportunity to share their passion and to facilitate that kind of knowledge transfer, right, in the organization. And we know that when it's done right, a really strong mentorship program also improves retention, which is, I know, a challenge for some businesses, right?
Yeah. So we do have some questions coming in, which is great. But first I want to address, COVID has affected everybody. And so I'm curious, from the work that you've done and that you're doing, how have you seen COVID impacting work integrated learning, especially as it might relate to small businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that employers are hiring fewer students, and they hired fewer students in 2021 than in previous years, and for reasons that you probably won't find surprising, Allison, right? So for financial reasons, obviously, not having, they've had to, in cases where they've been able to rehire some staff. For instance, they've often prioritized rehiring folks who've been on leave. They've had to put on leave, right, as opposed to bringing on a student. So it may not be the number one priority. It may not have been the number one priority. Safety and health protocols, obviously, ongoing challenge. The situation here in Ontario, that's an ongoing issue, right? Safety has got to be number one, health has got to be number one, and sometimes there isn't a suitable workplace for a student at this time. But at the same time, so there have been challenges, fewer students, a lot of barriers. Those are a few of the big ones, I think. I'm sure you've heard of others that you can share, in your region. But certainly, at the same time, organizations, I've spoken with small business owners and organizations across Canada who've really pivoted in some inspiring ways. I don't want to be kind of just a downer here, in the sense that folks have figured out really creative ways of supporting students remotely, and that often means just a few more check-in meetings. If you are in an industry that can work remotely. Really supporting a remote workplace culture is something that came up again and again in our consultations last year as both a challenge and an opportunity. And I've spoken to some small businesses that have done things like all kinds of online social activities, for instance, to help students just feel a part of the workplace. As different social hours, coffee chats. Introducing students to different members of the business just through online, virtual coffee chats, a speaker series. Obviously, larger employers have more opportunity to do this kind of programming. If you saw some of the articles on, RBC's virtual internship programming this summer, it's pretty amazing. Virtual speaker series and so forth and so on. Even if you don't have the money to invest in like a full-on virtual speaker series or something like that for your students. You can still sort of make some time to plot into your schedule some social activities and events to engage students and to make them feel really a part of your company, even though they're stuck at home like the rest of us, right? So I think small businesses are finding creative ways. I've heard lots of different ways that they're doing that. It's often more check-ins with students, right? To be frank, because students are greatly impacted by this pandemic, right? It's in terms of isolation and of course, as we're all talking about, the mental health challenges around that come with that blurring of boundaries between home and work and learning how to navigate those, right? There's a whole host of issues that make it more difficult, really, both for students and employers. But and it is challenging. I don't want to underplay it. At the same time, I want to recognize that the ways that the businesses are creatively responding.
Yeah, and what we have seen is certainly, we work mostly with small businesses, and small businesses have been significantly impacted with the pandemic. But we've also seen some really great examples of students helping businesses. So businesses that may have not been as digitally present as they were pre-pandemic, and they've needed some support in digital marketing or social media or e-commerce or things like that. Students have been able to come in and share their expertise, and it's expertise that's not necessarily held within the business. So getting the expertise of the students has been really great. The flexibility of some of the WIL programs at the schools that we work with, so we work with Waterloo, Laurier, and Conestoga, the flexibility of the programs has allowed some businesses to work with students who otherwise I'm not sure whether they would have. So there have been some really great things, and I think there's still a lot of really great opportunities for students to support businesses as reopening happens and recovery happens.
Absolutely, Allison. I think the stories from Access Student Talent are really encouraging, and I think the big conversation right now, obviously, is digital upskilling and reskilling, and that's something that we heard about last year as well, in terms of the challenges with e-commerce. You're shifting your business to e-commerce and getting your digital infrastructure, so to speak, in place, and digital upskilling. All those things are really important to talk about right now, and work integrated learning is a huge opportunity to support businesses in those areas, right? So I'm glad that's happening in Kitchener or Waterloo, and I think it can happen across Canada, really. It's needed, right? Because we know that small businesses have less support, less access to some of those digital resources, but through Will, I think we can make those connections and connect the dots to some students with great skills, right?
Okay, so we have a few minutes left, so we'll try and get through some of these questions as quickly as we can. One question that came in, I would really love to hear some of the other top barriers when you're talking about the barriers you found in the consultations. Likewise, did you hear what some of the top incentives or reasons for providing Will experiences were for businesses?
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, maybe I'll start with the second one first, right? So yeah, we asked about benefits and really access to a skilled talent pipeline, right? And so that's it's a bit of a funny term, skilled talent pipeline. So accessing young talent in your region, and really building a connection to young people with an interest in your industry and your company is really the number one reason. It's the top benefit, really, to engaging with post-secondary students. And of course, so an interesting thing, and we get into this in our ROI guide, we offer some discussion and some sort of advice here, is that often businesses have to kind of balance some of the longer term benefits. Like in the longer term, it's building that skilled talent pipeline, right? Of course, you also have to negotiate some of the risks, right? So poaching is an obvious risk that we talk about a lot for small businesses. You can invest the time and the energy working with a student, and maybe they won't stick with you, right? Maybe you don't realize the full benefits of that talent pipeline with every student you engage with, right? So you have to balance some of those, right? So to mitigate that kind of risk, there's production benefits and there's innovation benefits. Students bring great ideas to the workplace, and they can contribute in productive ways to your short-term goals too. And so how you balance some of the long-term benefits with the short-term is important. I think access to talent is really, it's in the name of your program, and it's the reason why employers are engaging, right?
Yeah. And can you touch on maybe what some of the other top barriers were that you saw?
Yeah, sure. So the some other key barriers. So recruitment is a huge barrier that I think I didn't get into previously. So many post-secondary institutions have decentralized work integrated learning programs. In other words, there's no central office that you can go to as an employer to find the relevant student for your program. And I should mention, there are some post-secondary institutions that do have centralized Will programs where there is a central office that coordinates across the entire institution. But for the most part, institutions in Canada tend to be decentralized. There's more focus on the post-secondary side. I know that from our colleagues in the academic sector, folks are working on better coordinating that. But in the meantime, that's a challenge in terms of finding a sight line into where the students are. And Access Student Talent responded directly to that need. So your program works to directly respond to that, obviously, and offers some really great hands-on support in navigating recruitment, which is hard, right? Mm-hmm. Which is hard. So that's that's a big one. And program inflexibility. Many small businesses feel that Will programs really aren't flexible enough to meet their needs, like the timelines don't align. For instance, even with funding, like you may have to you may not know about funding in time to kind of hire the students that you need, in other words. So the funding timelines don't line up with the business cycles, and, and the programs may not be flexible enough in terms of duration. Maybe you need a student for 6 weeks, not 4 months or something like that. And sometimes there just aren't those options locally.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So next question, what do you think the future of will look like in the new normal or post-pandemic? I'm sure that's a big question, but can you give us some insights into your thoughts?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, the future of will is, okay, one piece of that is that I think will be embedded within curriculum across the board in post-secondary institutions. So when you're designing a new academic program, I think we're going to be increasingly seeing experiential learning baked into student learning outcomes all across, from year 1 to year 4 or year 3 or whatever it is, and stackable. So maybe you have a small experience that first year, maybe a micro placement or a competition, and then in your 3rd or 4th year, you're going to be, doing a longer placement, an internship, or a co-op in your industry. And so I think right now we're focused on the big numbers, just making sure every student gets that experience. In the long run, I think we're going to be trying to make sure that every student gets the right progression through their academic program, right from that early experiential learning opportunity in 1st or 2nd year to something more substantive in the later years. And so on the student side and the kind of the programming side, I think that from the business side, really, I think we want to see greater flexibility, more coordination regionally in the delivery of role programming, so that really post-secondary institutions are working from day one with business partners to develop programming that meets the regional labor market needs, and so stronger regional integration within the skills ecosystem, stronger academic progression, and integration of will from day one. A couple areas that I'd like to see.
Okay, great. And last question before we wrap up. Can you speak a little bit more about the types of organizations that you're looking for with regards to the RFP process that you talked about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're looking for industry associations, chambers of commerce like yourself. We're looking for essentially partnerships between post-secondary institutions and other organizations, and industry associations or workforce agencies, could be not-for-profit, but partnerships where a post-secondary institution, one or more, is working with another organization on the industry side to really advance work-integrated learning in a region. So that's what we're looking for, and we're open to different types of organizations to take a lead in applying for the funding, but yeah, maybe with the exception of like federal agencies, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we have come to the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew. I want to also thank again our sponsor. So our title sponsor of the series, which is Manulife, our platinum sponsor of the series, which is the Immigration Partnership, this month's presenting sponsor, which is Gore Mutual Insurance, and of course today's speaker, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alison. Really, yeah, lovely to speak with you this afternoon, and feel free to reach out to Alison or I if you have any questions. Happy to follow up.
Yeah, great. Finally, I want to thank everybody who joined us today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about working with students. And as Andrew said, you're welcome to reach out to either of us. If you've never worked with a student before and you're interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to me. As a reminder, we host new Business Success Series sessions every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Join us next Wednesday for what employers need to know when hiring international students. Join us to learn the guidelines for hiring students while they are studying in Canada and the benefits of hiring international students upon graduation. Learn the do's and don'ts. We hope that you can join us. For full details and to register, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please share this series with your friends and colleagues. Join us every Wednesday afternoon for the next edition of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce Business Success Series, brought to you by Manulife, Platinum sponsor, Immigration Partnership, and May's presenting sponsor, Gore Mutual Insurance. Because it's Wednesday, it's a business success series. Thanks very much for joining us.